everybody. How we doing out there? Hey, whenever I'm called Dr. Bob, that's an upgrade. You know what I'm saying? I've been called a whole lot worse in my day, and but we're not going to talk about that because they're filming, and we don't want that to go out. A couple of housekeeping things. Well, first of all, we're really glad you're here today, and as you probably know, also God is really glad you're here today, and maybe something you didn't know. Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office is really glad that you're here today. So we start off a new series for your heart. You glad about that? All right. This is going to be a good day. I can tell already. We are starting off this week a new series called Bigger Than Me, and basically what it's going to focus on is not that I have a problem with alcohol, but that I have a problem with alcoholism. And a lot of times, especially if I fail to educate, open my mind, and try to learn more about myself and my problem, I can be really, really deceived and understand my situation only superficially, and as a result, try to fix my life in a very incorrect and unfortunately unsuccessful way. So we're going to really make an effort during this series. Actually going to be I think a 2-month series if I'm not mistaken. Forgive me if I'm wrong. And we're going to make sure that happens to none of you. And so, especially these next couple of weeks, I want to challenge you to bring your thinking caps, and we're going to take a journey. We're basically going to take a journey inward into ourselves, and we're going to start looking at the nature of the problem. And I just want to kind of throw an overview out on that. There's a lot of people who have a real difficulty, a conceptual issue. Call it what you want. This issue about, the church and recovery, those are different things. Just like, church and AA, they don't really mix and all this other stuff. I want to say that that's unfortunately very incorrect. Because to use a church word to explain what recovery is, redemption. And those of us in recovery, we know what our sin, we know what our Achilles heel, we know what our problem was. It was drugs and alcohol and selfishness and all these other things. And I got to stop living that way, and I got to change or I'm going to die. In the church, they kind of refer to it the same thing, although maybe not with the same intensity. They call it sin. And so recovering from sin in redemption is very much the same of recovering from addiction through the 12 steps in recovery, because both places, both journeys, both processes take you on a journey to a relationship with God. And so we're really talking about the same thing. So if you have trouble, because I kind of, if you haven't figured this out yet, I have a little different teaching style than most pastors. And the fact that at least get a hallelujah from the front row. I mean, one of the things I like doing is throwing down a bunch of drunk neck. I think just keep you awake first of all, and then maybe kind of sizzle the message in and slap it in your face a little bit, and hopefully it'll stick. And that's been it's kind of effective for a long time. So, to be honest with you, I don't really care if I piss people off. I'm good at it. It's my spiritual gift. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to go with it. You know what I'm saying? So if I tick you off and offend you, good. I'm sorry. Come back next week and I'll try to be better, okay? Forgive me, pray for me, and help a brother out, okay? So we're going to start with this series, and if you can hit with the first advancement there. One of the first things I learned when I was introduced to this concept of recovery is my problem wasn't alcohol. My problem was alcoholism. And I knew that meant a lot when I first heard that, but I had no idea what it was. So I did what any good newbie would do. I'm like, oh yeah. And good they didn't ask me, well, what does that mean? No, I wouldn't know what they were talking about. And so I remember one of the very first lessons I got in this re-education of myself, and it was what about alcoholism was. And the first thing they said was, listen, boy, it's alcoholism, not alcoholism. Okay, just because you come to treatment, just because you come to AA, it doesn't mean and just because you're not drinking, it doesn't mean your problem's gone. It means your solution is just beginning. Because, putting the alcohol down is one thing. And it's really the first half of the first step. The rest of the stuff is getting rid of all the other junk that led you to that place in the first place. So the ism of alcoholism, the first thing that was taught to me was that I had an instant short-term memory problem. And I was like, ism, instant short-term memory problem. Ism. I didn't get it. Like, I thought, ism. My sponsor wasn't good at spelling, but I wasn't good at staying sober, so I figured I'd listen to him a little bit. And so we started to keep going with this concept. And over the years, I've learned a lot about what the isms are. They're the idiosyncrasies, they're the brokenness, they're the character defects, they're the personality flaws that lead me to pain, with the expectation I know how to relieve that pain. Anybody get that? So I come home and I have this restless feeling in my heart, and I know if I stay home I'm not going to be able to fix it, so what do? I pick a fight with my wife. So then I can have an excuse to be mad and storm out and go do what I need to do. Anyone ever been there?
All the time.
Anyone been in that vicious cycle where emotions and thoughts led to emotions and thoughts and then led to actions and reactions and right back into addiction?
Heck yeah.
Well, these are the isms we're talking about, and we're going to learn a lot about that these next few weeks. And so I hope you come back. I hope you come here thinking and being challenged and look inward. And I promise you that if you make the effort, you will have a new awareness and really, honestly, a new respect for the problem, and also a new dedication or a new devotion to the solution. So this will do you real good if you hang in there with me. So help me with the first one, if you would. The first week today, we're going to do the IC. You're going to see they're all ISM, they're all little cutesy plays on words. I like that sort of stuff. So we're going to go to I see me today, and then next week I serve me, and you get the I swear by me. And these are that addiction is an affliction of mind, body, and soul. So we're going to look at the depth of this selfishness. We're going to look at the depth of this brokenness that leads to this perverse streak of continuing mood altering. And it's that continuing mood altering we're going to see actually, literally, changes the biology, the anatomy, the physiology of the brain, to where instead of saying stop or enough, it says more. So that vicious cycle of addiction is set up by it. So I'm going to see it again, mind, body, and spirit. So hit me with the first one. We're going to read the big book, fortunately or unfortunately, and I brought my bicycle focal so I can read along with you. That's cool. Page. Oh, here's the challenge, the homework too. Hopefully you all have a big book. If you don't, please get one. And when I say read, I don't mean read like a magazine or a novel or a comic book. I mean study like a textbook. Read, relate, ask questions, talk to your sponsor, your other support system. Talk about these principles, relate to them, see how they come alive in your life. And pages, about the end of 59 to 60, start around there, after where they talk about the steps, and this thought brings us to step 3, and they talk about all this stuff about how self comes in and literally ruins our life and sets up that perpetual pain that fuels the desire for mood altering. So please, do yourself a real favor, around 60 to 63, give or take. Okay, please study that. We're going to be spending a little bit of time there, and of course other places the next couple of weeks. So as you can see up on the screens here, page 61, says, is he not a victim of the delusion? Now, delusion, if you don't know, is like a false belief. And the doctor's opinion talks about unable after a time to differentiate the truth from the false. I think something is one way, the sky's blue, but it's really green, or vice versa, or whatever it is. I'm kind of confused about reality. That's what a delusion is. It's kind of believing misinformation. Ever believe in misinformation? Yeah. Anyone ever sell you something and said, this is good stuff? Anyone tell you this is good stuff? Yeah, that's right. You thought it was good. Was it good for you? Did it do good to you in the long run? But you thought it was good. You thought it was needed. You thought you needed it more. You thought you needed more. You thought it needed better. And when you heard about that good/bad dope on the other end of town that was killing people, that was the real good stuff that you needed, right? My goodness. Unable to differentiate the truth from false delusion. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? What they mean by this is if I can just get you to do what you need to do according to me, in other words, what I want you to do, if I can get these other situations to go according to how I want to go, in other words, if I can control, if everything would go my way, I would be happy. I lived that way for a good 30 plus years. Go ahead, ask me how that worked for me. There you go. I ended up in seats like you and worse places, It didn't work out so well. I was trying so hard to have good things in my life, but bad things kept happening. It was a delusion that I was chasing. And we're going to see a whole lot more about that here as we go on. And don't his actions, in other words, when I try to manage, when I try to control, when I try to make life suit me, and why can't we all get along kind of thing, don't his actions make each of them, in other words, the others around my life, wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? I used to teach this group, and we used to cover this in step 3. And I used to ask them kind of a question. It's more rhetorical, but I'll give it to you just to kind of make a point. I asked them, if you could stop your life, kind of like boom on a dime, moments before you arrived at this facility, okay? And if you could stop your life and you can ask yourself this question, which would it be? In your life at that time, was there more A, confusion, or B, more harmony? And as you can guess, since they were driving up to a rehab, nobody comes to the treatment on Winning Street, in case you didn't know that, what I mean? Don't come to see how the other half lives, Oh, they got still have rehab. Maybe I'm going to get my autograph signed. Let me go into treatment for 35 days, That's not how people begin their permanent vacation after they hit the lottery, just in case you didn't know that. If going to treatment is on your bucket list, get a life, right? And it should be on your fecal roster if nobody told you. Okay, so when I ask the question, even people in detox say, oh, confusion, my life's in shambles, right? And then I ask them this, I'm kind of setting them up, as you kind of figured out already. I say, okay, a lot of confusion going on in your life. What were you trying to get in your life at that time? More confusion or more harmony? And everybody would say, well, of course, more harmony. I was trying for harmony. So I said, let me get this straight. You're trying hard, giving it your all to get harmony, and you're ending up neck deep in confusion. Can you see there's something not quite clean in the cream? There's something wrong in that equation, Here I'm trying to get, and all I'm doing is getting. That's not good business. There's something wrong with that. And that's what they're saying. So can you hit the next one for me, please, Christine? Thank you. Page 62. This is where the money is. You ought to have this one in your heart, written down, memorized, etc. Selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. And it goes down further on the page to say, we invariably find that at some time in the past, we've made decisions based on self, which later place us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. So if you put those two pages together, we just covered my managing. If I'm trying to manage my life to suit me, it's going to end up working around one important me. Me. And if you're religious, you might be going around the Holy Trinity, me, myself, and I. Okay? But nonetheless, it's a self-centered life. And what the big book, and of course the Bible teaches all day long, is that a self-centered life is a death-centered life. Okay? So we're going to see that as we go on. So hit me with your next shot, fire away, thank you. Okay, very nice. You've probably heard the third step prayer, and if you've been reading the book on page 63, and in there it talks about a very interesting thing. It says, relieve me from the bondage of self so that I may better do your will. The bondage of self. Do you know how enslaving and tyrannical selfishness is? Selfishness is. It is so enslaving because I must have what I must have, and I must have it now. And that becomes a more powerful, directing, driving, and influencing force in someone suffering addiction in their life. And eventually becomes the only priority. Think about this. I asked this, another question I used to ask. I said, how many people have noticed that the acquisition, ingestion, and the enjoyment of your substance has become over time a more important priority in your life? Does anybody ever notice that in your active addiction? Some people notice this. I've been around the block this many times. And think about this for yourself. How many people that same thing, that acquisition, enjoyment of the substance has become the most important priority of your life? Even more important than your job. Even more important than your health. Even more important than your relationships. Even more important than your employment. Even more important than your finances. Or even more important than your freedom. I mean, people are facing breaking probation if they give a dirty urine, and then the phenomenon of craving sets up. And what are you going to pay more attention to then? Passing the urine test or getting loaded? You know? What about you have a family requirement, responsibility, engagement, and you want to get it on? Well, that family engagement is going to have to go second fiddle, isn't it? And yet, at one time in your life, I guarantee most, if not all of you, your family was the most important thing in your life. That's how powerfully enslaving selfishness can be. All right, hit me with your next one. Now, this one I ask you a couple questions, and if you have a pen or writing thing or your phone, type this in. Ask yourself, relate to the questions that this asks. And there's a few of us. What sort of thinking? Here's the first question. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? That, if you really slow that down and play that over in your mind when that's happened to you, that will teach you a lot of things. And it will teach you even more things if you actually write it down and go in slow motion. Okay? Why does he? In other words, why do we do it? Why do we do it? Of what is he thinking? Now, this is, you know the story of the jaywalker. That's in the book, and that's self-explanatory. I'm going to give you another example. Ever touch a hot stove? It burns, right? Hurt your fingers, land really hot, it gets you a blister, causes some real damage, right? Do you say to yourself, well, that was a bummer, but hey, I got 9 more, let's go a second time. And after that, when you run out of fingers, you say, hey, I need a place to sit. No. Even a full-blooded Italian knows that on a stove, that red glowing element is not a lollipop or a play toy, right? Everybody, even at an early age, learns that you don't touch a hot stove. But, let me ask you a question. What's burned you more in your life? That hot stove or your drug of choice? That's right, that drug of choice hurt you a lot worse than a little blister on your little finger. But yet burning a finger on a stove, you can learn not to do it. But that drug of choice, you go back to it time after time after time. Why does he? Why does he say this time will be different, this time it won't burn me? What is he thinking? What I'm thinking of is self. What I want, when I want it. where I'm going. Whether it hurts my family's well-being, my health, my freedom, doesn't matter what it is. I want it. Is anybody, it's not quiet, is anybody relating to this? See, the deeper you look inside to see it, the more you wake up to the need of a solution. That's why this is important. I'm not going to go full on to the solution if I'm not full on aware of the problem. All right, so hit that next one if you would. Now, I don't know about you, I got to a point in my life where I was taught in school that, the world revolved around the sun, but my addiction taught me that the world really revolved around me. You get what I'm saying? And that, get that ugly mug off there, Christine. Would you advance the next slide? That's disgusting. Man, I need to vomit bag on here. It's brutal. All right. So let me hit you with this, a little math problem, okay? The altered neurobiology, all right, when I constantly, chronically, continually, for a repetitionally period of time, okay, I put a mood-altering substance, a chemical, on my brain that shouldn't be too hard to understand. It's going to affect, it's going to change, it's going to alter the way that brain functions. Okay, it's going to change the physiology, it's going to change the anatomy, it's going to change the connections, it's going to change a whole lot of things. And one of the results is these magnified emotions. Anybody ever noticed that in your addictions, you became a little more impulsive, a little more irrational, a little more erratic, a little more reactive, a little more off the handle? Well, that is the emotions being magnified and it being lifted up over the intellect, so the emotions run your decisions more than your rational thinking mind. And that, we can go through neurobiology, we won't do that today, but that's through the prefrontal cortex being shut down by the pleasure center, okay? So those magnified emotions, in other words, I don't like this feeling of withdrawal, or I don't like this feeling of dysphoria, I don't like this feeling of depression or anxiety, and I want to change it, because the next ingredient is self, and this is the vicious cycle that happens. Go ahead, Christine. I have a faulty perception. In other words, I can't fully and accurately see reality. Remember, can't differentiate the true from the false. I have a faulty perspective. In other words, I get manure-colored goggles on. I see everything is negative. Everything's about me. Why are you out to get me? This type of stuff. And then as a result, that emotional reaction kicks in. And because I'm driven by that emotional reaction, I get a faulty response. And that is that vicious cycle that happens over and over and over that leads me to a place of negativity where I can't get out. Maybe next. Now, I team that together with that thing that I told you my sponsor taught me the very, very beginning, is that I have this incompetent short-term memory. And we're going to read three parts of the book to look at that. And the first one's on page 34. It says, "There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, the utter inability to leave alone no matter how great the necessity and the wish." Hit me with the next one. And then that's the, we are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We're off defense against the first drink. Now, the real important thing is this altered memory is that at certain times it raises its ugly head. If you've read Bill's story, you know that these certain times got him over and over and over and almost killed him. He would be scared sober by a terrible thing in his life. His pride would make him want to get sober because he was so humiliated by his last run. He would have all these different things, financial needs, family needs to get him sober. But each time, he failed because of ignorance to this certain time. And then before I explain that, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to challenge you. What are your certain times? Write down about a dozen for you as they apply to their life. What were your certain times that you tripped up? What were the things going on, the triggers going on, the issues going on the inside? I'm not talking about the outside, I'm talking about the inside. For Bill, it was this. He would be able to stay sober on his own for a period of time, weeks, months even. And then all of a sudden he would say to himself something like this. He'd say, man, because he was a stockbroker, so he's constantly in front of alcohol, and he'd be saying, no, the drinks all day long, right? So after a while, he thought to himself, see, after a few months of that, he'd be saying, man, I'm able to say no to drinks at parties and dinner engagements all day long, all night long. Maybe I'm making too big of a fuss about this alcohol thing. Maybe I'm over this, you know what I mean? And that certain time for him is this. He would let his guard down. Let me ask you a question. Anybody here ever let your guard down? Anybody here notice that was followed relatively shortly by a relapse? That's one of your certain times. My certain time, I'll just tell you what my certain time was. My certain time was when things were going good in my life, and it was time to celebrate. See, I get hunkered down and get through a crisis, but when it's time to celebrate, I got it on like Donkey Kong, you know what I'm saying? It was time to go. That was my reward. So what are your certain times? Let's hit the next one. It said, page 42, I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind, and I saw that willpower and self-knowledge could not help me during those strange mental blank spots. And that's another phrase, if you will, strange mental blank spots for those certain times. You know, that inability to bring into my consciousness the fact that I promised not to do it. Here's a real simple exercise. Have you ever said you're never going to do it again and meant it? And then done it again? That's right. And that's, again, another example, and there's millions of them, of course, of how enslaving and controlling selfishness can be. So as you can probably guess so far, the challenge is to identify with this and see where it is in your life. See, if I can see where it is in my life and where it manifests, maybe I can do something about it. That's where we're going with this today. And you can hit me with the next one. And obviously, you know, if I'm going to hit you with the problem and rub your nose in it, I'm going to throw the solution out at you. And the 12 and 12 talks about this, pretty cool. It says, for us, the process of gaining a new perspective was unbelievably painful. It was only by repeated humiliations that we're able to force to learn something about humility. And a good way to look at humility is that I don't think less of myself, but I think of myself less. Okay, instead of, like, if I divided my thought life up during the day, think about this for a second. Divide your, because we're always thinking, we're working, we're thinking, we're driving, we're thinking, we're talking, we're thinking, I'm up here, I'm thinking, I'm like, how long is this guy going to go, damn it, that type of thing. We're all thinking in our heads. Think about this. If you could pie chart your thought life, what percentage of that thought life would be in one way, shape, form, or another about you? Things that make you go, where's the praise band when you need it, right? Absolutely. So humility, the way to look at humility is how is it that I can think more about you, more about God, and less about me? Not think less of me, not put myself down, but think about me less and think about you more. Next one, please. 76, I believe, right? Okay, we make the changes in our attitude which permit us, again, with humility, there it is, as our guide, we move out from ourselves and toward others and toward God. And this is the key, this is the solution to that bondage of self, that enslaving, powerful force that cannot be broken by self-will or self-knowledge. And the last one, please, is this, Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourself, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. And so the more we go through this process of the 12 steps, the more we learn about the problem and we try to push away the problem and embrace the solution, which is, again, the relationship with God that improves over time as we grow. And as we have that relationship grow with God over time, He puts His Spirit into us, to change our motives, to change our perspective, to change our faulty thinking, yes, to heal our brain, okay, and allow us to think more normally about putting us in proper perspective. See, my life is in a lot off balance when self is number one priority. My life is in balance when God is number one priority. Family is number two priority. When I say God number one priority, I equate that with sobriety, because without God there's no sobriety. So God and sobriety is number one, family is number two, and anything else is number three. So if I'm even close to getting above number three, I'm getting out of balance. So that's another way of taking an inventory and seeing where you are and how you relate to it. So the challenge for next week is to read pages 60 to 63. We're going to continue with this in a different way. Pastor Phil had asked me before I came up, I want me to remind you, we're going to have like 5 or so minute break, and then we're going to come back for open share. So please come back. I'd love to hear from you, see